And around 4 or 5 years back, I mean, I had a gut feeling, and not just me, I believe a lot of you also, that in future, if there are few key trends which are going to change the way security is happening today, zero trust is definitely going to be one of them. And not just that, we felt that it could be one of such landscape shifting technologies which could change the way we do cybersecurity. But what we did was also around 4 or 5 years back, we started doing workshops on zero trust security. So Alan, you might find it interesting that in our CISO platform community in India, we had been doing workshops. Like we did a first half a day workshop on zero trust around 4 or 5 years back. So we love thinking about future, and this had been one of the things which we thought would be the future. And interestingly, I think we are in that zone where zero trust is actually shaping the world. So we'll discuss today why zero trust is shaping the world, and what are the drivers, what are the use cases, what are the critical capabilities, and success and failure factors, etc. So I believe this is going to be a very interesting discussion. And with that setting of the context, I would love to invite all the panelists to do a quick round of introduction. So Lakshmi, maybe, and I can start with myself. I'm Bikash Barai, and I'm one of the co-founders of CISO platform as well as Fire Compass. So that's a little bit about me. Lakshmi.
Yeah, so my name is Lakshmi Narayan Kalyaparma. I'm heading cybersecurity technology and operations for Infosys. So within this responsibility, I'm responsible for enterprise security architecture, which is again managing this zero trust network, and also responsible for security operations and vulnerability management and security standards and security engineering of niche cybersecurity technologies. That's about me.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Nabankur.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Nabankur. I am currently an advisor. I am not involved with any company directly. I was with Axis Bank as a CISO. Thereafter, I was a advisor come CISO with Bandhan Bank in Calcutta. I am a freelance consultant and advisor now. I am associated with HSBC and some other companies. So because it is a pandemic time, all my work is being done from home, all virtual connections. And I am also associated with CISO platform for a long time. So that's all for me.
Thank you, Nabankur. Alan.
Thank you very much. My name is Alan Sanchez, and I am the CISO for Fortinet in EMEA. And the idea behind having a CISO in a company like Fortinet, I can see in the background of Nabankur a music symbol, right? So let me pick up an analogy from the music. There was a famous jazz musician called Miles Davis that said, the music changes every day. But if you're not playing with real jazz musicians, you don't realize it's changing every day. And you could be playing the jazz of yesterday. And my role is to, in cybersecurity, that I believe changes every day. And congratulations for Bikash and your group to have foreseen zero trust network access 5 years ago. Congratulations, guys. You're really playing the music of today, that's for sure. The idea is, as I go about discussing with musicians like you, with cybersecurity officers like you, I can perceive better the changes and share the ideas that we all have as a community. And the future, because Bikash says he's interested in the future, is a very passionate universe, but also very threatening. We just, as a member of the World Economic Forum, we're just coming out of the cybersecurity dimension of the World Economic Forum. That is called Center for Cybersecurity. And the first big news over the last, I would say, 4 years is that you remember what the WEF was initially. The World Economic Forum is all about prime ministers and chiefs of state. You would have asked these guys 5 years ago to spell cybersecurity. They have no clue. You know, they're discussing chief of state and prime minister matters. Today, not only can they spell it, but they put a dedicated cybersecurity forum as part of the World Economic Forum, and we are a member of that. And they see the future, because Bikash says he's interested in future, as they call it the fourth industrial revolution. And Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of the WEF, says it is the merger of the biological world, the real world, and the IT world. That is the future, this merger. But he says the futures can be a nightmare if we don't secure the exchange. And that puts us, humble servant of cybersecurity, at the center of the World Economic Forum and at the center of a society that is coming towards a future that can be very promising or a nightmare. So to me, that is a great framework for us to start this discussion about the threat and why the trust is a very important factor in making this new world happening.
Thanks, Alan. So Agnello, a quick introduction from your side.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Agnello D'Souza. I'm the CISO for Kotak Mahindra Bank. I've been with the bank for 15 years now, and I've seen the security and threats evolve over the last so many years in the bank. And obviously, the financial sector is at the center of the whole cybersecurity thing, because that's where the money is, and the hackers are obviously very much looking at seeing how to exploit threats over there. So I'm looking forward to a very engaging and interesting discussion, and wishing to share with you all and also learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Agnello. So let's do one thing. I mean, these key challenges and top threats sometimes actually becomes a long discussion because we are in that mode of facing challenges and threats, and we get very associated and excited by that. But our topic is today zero trust. So what I thought was, can we do something different, which I know we haven't prepared, huh? And sometimes I like putting great people like you on a spot like this or at a spot, huh? Whatever is that right English. So can we do something like have this, like the key challenges and top threats, where we talk about it as rapid fire question. So let's do a rapid fire. What are the key challenges that you are facing and top threats, without really explaining much? So if we do a kind of rapid fire round of key challenges and top threats, and then we can come back and spend a little bit of time deeper into a few.
What happened? Because you're frozen.
Yeah, Bikash, you seem to be frozen. We can't hear you anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes these bandwidth issues happen, local issues.
Yeah.
Shital, I don't know if you can still hear us.
Yes, Alain, I am trying to connect with Bikash if he is joining in. Some network issue at there.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, because is back.
Yeah, sorry. I think so. If I just got dropped, but in case I get dropped, any of you can just please feel free to continue. Huh? So let's do a quick rapid fire key challenges and top threats. Any of you can get started. Lakshmi, you want to start? or Nabankur?
Yeah.
Nabankur.
Yeah, let me start. See,
Yeah.
after, I think you are asking from a after COVID perspective, right? Otherwise, we have to go into a long history of threats.
That's right.
So after COVID, I think the remote access has created a lot of problems because most of the people are outside than inside. The less people are connecting from on-prem network, and a lot of people are connecting outside the network. That's the first challenge. The second challenge is even within the remote access, whether it is inbound access towards on-prem applications or data center applications, we are opening the entire network, whether it is through VPN or through any other remote access mechanism. We are opening the entire network, not just with the application, because that's how the legacy systems work, right? And the third challenge is on the endpoint. The endpoint and identity become the new perimeter, and especially after COVID, almost 90 to 95% of people working from home. Really, this endpoint and identity becomes the perimeter, and we have to depend on the controls which are deployed on the endpoint to an extent on the controls deployed on the cloud side. Wherever has whoever has started this cloud journey or digital transformation journey to the cloud. So that's what I believe these three are major challenges from my perspective.
Great. Thanks, Lakshmi. Nabankur?
Yeah, from I thought that security, whether COVID or non-COVID, there are certain things which have to be really focused, and some of the things are not done properly, and that remains a perennial problem. And the pandemic has given us an opportunity now to bolster the security, and so there are some items which are perennially ignored, which I want to focus. One is that the SIEM, which is implemented by everybody. What are the controls which are taken into account by the SIEM? We see mostly the login failures, and there are some other items, some other incidents which are taken into account. For example, abnormal usage of resources, or maybe activation of a suspended user ID, some of these things. But my concern always has been that if it happens one or two cases, people tend to ignore that. See, L1, L2, L3, there are several levels in which the SIEM incidents are handled. But if it is only one or two issues, how they handle it? Do they focus then that everything, if it comes to the CISO will be mad. So how they really handled is a challenge. And now the linking of the past events is very important, which I do not know whether it is being done. Because today, maybe one or two cases have happened of login failure. And tomorrow, the third incident may happen in another area, abnormal usage of the systems. How they are being linked properly, SIEM, I'm really always worried about this thing. That is number one. Secondly, I think that some of the issues are ignored by the companies. For example, say file integrity monitoring is a solution. If some file is being getting altered by some malware, so it is only way is to have a FIM solution to be implemented and checked. But people tend to use maybe alternate solutions like privilege identity management or something else, and they are indirect methods, and their monitoring frequency periodicity also is not known. If PIM is implemented, how frequently they are being monitored, and they're so some of these things, I know they are very deep issues which have to be, I think, properly handled in future. Otherwise security will never be perfect. So I'm
Thanks.
restricting myself to this much now.
Thanks, Nabankur. So, Agnolo, rapid fire question. What are the key challenges and threats that you see in the current context?
Yeah, the challenges that Lakshmi and Nabulkar sir has raised are very are uh, exactly the key challenges that even we are looking at, and they have raised very valid points. So while Mr. Nabulkar Sen was talking about the SIEM, I think two very critical issues over here is that in the SIM, generally, see, we have a 24/7 security operations center, and then there are like different level of people. You have level 1, level 2, level 3, whatever you call them. The key challenge that we have is on the skill set of these people, because in a 24/7 operations, you have people who, with a 1 year experience, 2 year experience, those kind of guys, and hence becomes sometimes a big concern, because you may, some of the important alerts can get missed out or not been properly analyzed, and those kind of things. So there's a heavy dependency on people, and that is one key challenge that we have to deal with. And second thing is that in the traditional SIEM, what is the level of monitoring that is being done? So today, basically, what happens is that we pick up logs from various systems, but it could be possible that logs from all systems are not being picked up. If they are being picked up, then the whole issue of storage and how to manage the logs and all these things happen. And when an incident strikes, then you realize that oh, the logs are not there, they're not sufficient logs to go back and investigate and construct the entire threat again. So you don't know really as to what has happened and what is the level of impact that it can cause. So that is one critical area. And the whole issue about end user awareness, right? People are the weakest link and continue to be the weakest link. So in the last 6 months, when we are seeing a lot of phishing and phishing related attacks on customers, where people give away their accesses and everything, and then becomes a challenge to protect those customers and prevent those frauds. So in addition to what the other panelists have mentioned, these are the two key things that we have. And the third very important thing is about the vendor risk management. Okay, so as a bank, so we might do a lot of things to secure the bank and those kind of things, but then we are connected to a lot of merchants. We are connected to our various service providers that provide us services for various things, and there are some accesses that are open for them, and hence an attack over there could come in through that. Something like a supply chain kind of an attack can happen. So that is something which we always worry about. So these are some of the couple of issues that we have.
Thanks, Agnello. So Alan, in terms of rapid fire, what are the top threats and challenges that you see?
I would take two examples of challenges. The first one, I would call it the paradox of our job as CISO. We need at the same time to connect, because it is a connected world, right? And which means to open. And at the same time, we are asked to protect, which sometimes means closing. So we are always into this challenge of enabling this hyper-connected world to be collaborative, to be open, to be hyper-connected, but we need at the same time to protect and to close and make barriers. So if you try to depict this analogy in the real world, we need to build walls and to build doors and to build walls. So this is our paradox, right? And I would qualify it as the intrinsic challenge that we have as a CISO. The second one maybe is it is a new job, to be honest, right? In the C-suite, you find for a long time a CFO is a very established and very powerful individual, not to mention the CEO, who is the big boss. And then you have the CMO, who owns the customer and the marketing, very well established. And then comes this new guy, or this new lady, the CISO. And there is a CIO as well. So the first challenge is to establish yourself and learn the language of the board. And the language of the board is generally not technology. And we speak technology. So our challenge is to learn this new language, to be able to rally with us this very powerful, like 500-pound gorilla that have been here for a long time, and just try to exist and to have a role. Because in the first time, people say, what do you do exactly? We have a CIO and we're doing okay. No breach. So what do you do really with your C-level title? And then there is a breach, and everybody comes at you and say, it's your fault. It was your job to avoid it. So it's a 0 and 1 from a human perspective. we have to deal with that. And that's also, I believe, one of the challenges of our profession.
Great. Thanks, Alan. So I think just to summarize on the key challenges and threats, so we got some very interesting pointers. Lakshmi mentioned about remote access, endpoint, and identity-related risk. And then both Nabankur and Agnello spoke about broadly visibility, right? Ability to detect whether it's SIEM or file integrity. Then the people side of risk was the other thing which came up, vendor risk management. And finally, Alan brought up the paradox of security where you have to open the door and close the door at the same time. So reminds me of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle or the quantum cat. So and also the language of the board, right? So interesting set of thoughts and ideas. So let's move to the next part, which is on zero trust. And before we move, what is zero trust? I'd love to discuss on why did the world need another technology? Anyway, if you look at the cybersecurity world, it's an alphabet of soup. I mean, there are so many technologies. You have got SaaS, DAST, IaaS, RAS, this, that. Like, it's a world filled up with thousands of technologies. Why did the world need another technology which is zero trust or something like that? So can we discuss a bit on what was that fundamental unsolved problem which was there or is there which zero trust tries to solve? So let's first discuss on that, then we'll come back to what is zero trust. So anybody wants to take up on that, what is that fundamental unsolved problem which was there in the current, what is there in the current architecture or was there previously, which zero trust wants to solve?
If you allow me, Bikash,
Yes, Alan.
I will perhaps bring, I promise, I bring a very limited number of slides, less than 5, but perhaps to set the landscape of why zero trust. Why are we? It's a very legitimate question when we propose to spend some time together as human beings when the life is short. Why spending this time on zero trust? What is the genesis and the context? If you allowed me to share my screen for a couple of minutes, allow me just to try to do that. Maybe if Shital could allow me to be a presenter. Fantastic. Thank you, Shital. Okay. Can you guys see something?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what we had to protect not so far ago. This is not 20 years ago. This is perhaps 5 or even 4 years ago, right? And we had a relatively simple ecosystem to protect. And you recognize here, I don't need to explain everything you see here. You see various entities that are connected to each other's via a network. And then outside, you had the internet. And it was okay to have a next generation firewall in between these two worlds. And if you do your job properly and configure this perimeter kind of problem well, you were okay. Okay, you can take good decisions as regard to the routing, to all the missions you have. Now there's billions and billions of new edges that have emerged. We have almost 20 billion objects that potentially connect to any network. It's coming from factories. We have 2 extremely knowledgeable people from the banking system, where you have many of these smart applications, smart devices that connect to the network. And I would just mention the home edge. At the beginning of this year, let's take February, a very respectable analyst company said by 2023, there will be 30% of the workforce working from home. Weeks after that statement, it was 95%. The home edge all of a sudden became absolutely important. So, and then as a result of that, the threat is evolving in volume and in complexity very much. This red curve you can see here represents the number of records that have been stolen. And we've passed from a few millions to now billions. That is 3 orders of magnitude. Very few protection missions all of a sudden saw the enemy raising 3 orders of magnitude. No army has ever seen that, and we are to deal with that. And that is just the volume, the complexity of the threat. You can perhaps see at the bottom of this slide here the big stars of the bad guys, the malicious software. They are more sophisticated as a result of becoming numerous. So as a result, this is what happens. We have cyber attacks that have increased very much only in the first quarter of 2020. 37% increase in India, for instance. Also, in number of incidents, we're reaching 1.4 million cybersecurity incidents. And India is not the only country. Everywhere in the world where I talk to, we see this raise because the perimeter has expanded dramatically. So this is where we need zero trust as a concept. And perhaps let me say one thing about zero trust. It is a great concept, but in a terrible world, because it doesn't mean that we are going to stop to trust our customers, our employees, our partners, our vendors. That is not what it means. But it does mean that every transaction, every application, every device, every session needs to earn the right to access to this expanded network and earn it in real time. So actually, zero trust is an answer to this expanding perimeter, more complex work, more sophisticated application, and speed. 5G is represented on this diagram. It's like by unit of time, say per second, you have 1,000 more traffic happening. So more soldiers coming to attack you, and you have to spare the good guy from the bad guy in milliseconds. This is where also one of the reasons of the genesis of zero trust, I think.
Great. So, Alan, that's a great point in terms of setting the context why zero trust is needed. And I'd love to also ask Nabankur and Lakshmi and Agnello on the zero trust, what is zero trust, etc. So I wanted to set a little bit of context. So what was the problem which was unsolved in the previous security architecture? So in the previous security architecture, the problem is that if you are in the network, you have neighbors. You can see the neighbors, ping them, and also send some packets to the ports which are open. Now that had been absolutely okay in the current form of architecture. So in the current form of architecture, it says it is okay for me to trust my neighbor, and my neighbor can send packets to my ports. Now that as an architectural model has got certain challenges. The moment what Alan mentioned, when we are opening up our perimeter and things are getting more complex. So the previous architectural model where I trust my neighbors and other systems in the network, and trust in the sense that I trust that I can send packets. I trust that somebody can ping me and send packets to my ports. So that has a challenge, because if we do that, then we are making it very, very difficult, because I can't in today's world trust my neighbors in the sense, because the neighbor could be the bad actor also. In that case, you have to put firewalls in every single system, and the number of doors and windows that you build is just too many, right? So the conventional security model fails there, because it's not possible. So that was the kind of need for a new model. So let me ask Nabankur and Agnello, do you want to set the context of like what is zero trust? Alan and I, we kind of discussed on why zero trust is required, why the conventional security architecture fails. So Nabankur or Agnello, do
Yeah,
you want to add?
let me tell a few words on this. See, traditionally the security models, which we have seen for maybe last 20, 30 years ago, that everything inside an organization is supposed to be trusted. That was the traditional model inside the network. Now the network means what? Now the perimeter is getting blurred. It is not today, not because of the pandemic. It is a zero trust concept has come maybe a few years ago, and it is not a single solution. So one side is that the perimeter is getting blurred. We do not know where is the perimeter ending. And as Bikash mentioned, that we cannot even trust our neighbors now. So we have to implement certain controls, and it is not one control. There is a defense in depth. We know that various things have to be implemented to achieve zero trust. Basically, we cannot trust anyone. Now, whom can we trust? A trust network, there is a concept of trust network. We have to define and document the trust network, whom we can trust and whom we can build relationships of trust with. Even employees who are supposed to be trusted. Now we know that every employee cannot, view the data of all departments. So employees also will have to be controlled. So the trust will have to be defined properly at who can be trusted up to what level, and the controls are to be built around that. So that is the basics of zero trust, that if you want to trust someone, first of all, define what is the trust relationship you are going to build with your employees, with your vendors, who can do what exactly. That documentation is very, very important. Secondly, after doing that, whenever you are implementing certain controls and solutions, it may be ABCD, several things which we'll discuss later, and how are you implementing those controls, and whether you are implementing up to the end. As I mentioned earlier about the scrutiny, about the particular the logs which are coming. Agnello also mentioned about that. The logs which are coming from various security solutions, the combination of which will be leading to a zero trust environment.
Yes. So another point on definition of trust, and I would like if any of you want to define that. One of the key elements which is different in the zero trust model compared to the previous model is that in this case, trust is transient. Trust is no longer fixed. Earlier, it used to be that if I am your neighbor, I am inside the network, I have a trust, and that is fixed. Or if I give my username and password, and I have got access to the system, now I have a fixed trust, right? So zero trust came up with this change that trust is no longer fixed, trust is transient and has to be evaluated on a continuous basis. So anybody wants to talk about trust, Agnello, or not just trust, or you can just talk about from your
Yeah,
perspective about the zero trust model?
yeah. Correct. So when you talk about zero trust, actually zero trust is not a specific technology that we are talking about. So generally, what happens is that, or everyone today has a different perception of what is zero trust, right? And most people think, is that macro segmentation is zero trust. Okay, while macro segmentation is a very key aspect of it, but when you look at zero trust, you have to look at everything end to end holistically. So right from, so you have to address the people part of it, the process part of it, and the technology. You have to address all these areas, to actually to get a complete zero trust, kind of a security which is there. I think one of the issues, like because you mentioned, about, the ports are open and I can ping my neighbor and all those things. I think one of the challenges that has been there, and why this is like this, is because we don't have a proper view of the transaction flows between various systems and applications. And because you don't have that view of, who's supposed to talk to whom and those kind of things, and hence what happens is it's like, every system on the internal network is allowed to speak to every other system, and there is a limited amount of, segmentation that is there. So what we need is basically some system, or something that can basically help us to understand those transaction flows, help us to map out those transaction flows, which will then help us to do a proper level of segmentation over here. So I think that is where the challenge is, and I think there are technologies which we are now seeing evolving, which probably a couple of years back was not available in my view.
Great. Thanks, Agnello. So that was a great point, is that zero trust is not necessarily a single technology, but it is a new concept. And
Right.
this concept is not same as before. So it's a kind of fundamental, very, very big shift from the earlier model. So Lakshmi, do you want to add anything on what is zero trust? And then we'll also come back to Alan to conclude on that.
Yeah. So Bikash, as you mentioned, this is a concept, right? And also it's a journey. So it is not technology we are buying and implementing for zero trust. As you mentioned, we have to start with the remote access or whatever security controls we want to change from a architecture perspective. That has to be designed first. Then we have to move towards this architectures. This is a combination of the network services and consolidation of security technologies. To start with, internet, right, is a very basic thing. The secure web gateways is the one component which again will be consolidated with various other security technologies. Right now, we are deploying multiple technologies to achieve this. So going forward, this will be consolidated. For example, the data leakage prevention or the secure web gateways or MPLS, the SD-WAN, and other components like network traffic analysis, user entity behavior analytics, all that will be integrated. And as I mentioned earlier, the identity and the device becomes a new perimeter that will be validated from multiple perspectives. One is the health check of the device, where the device is connecting, and whether that device is perfectly all right from both from patches perspective or from IT hygiene perspective, whether that device is anywhere connected to the any other malicious links or infected with any other malicious things will be validated. And also identity also will be validated from a credential leakage perspective. And more importantly, what is that identity is allowed to access within the network, or if they are accessing the particular application, only based on that identity's role, the necessary part of that application will be permitted to access, not the entire network, not the entire application. That is the problem with the current traditional model of network access, which is going to be a change. But at the same time, there is a cultural shift is required, because so far network team is working separately and the security team is working separately. That also has to be consolidated. A lot of collaboration is required between network team as well as the security team to achieve this, because this is a collaboration of network services, firewall services, the secure web gateway services, and also consolidation of security solutions like DLP or the UEBA, network traffic analysis, and also to an extent anti-malware control, identity and access governance. All that will be embedded into this zero trust network. That's my view, Bikash.
Great. Thanks, Lakshmi.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because
there is
just
an
one thing, if I
interesting,
could add,
yes,
yeah, because
yes,
just one thing, if I could add, based on, so Lakshmi just mentioned that the IT and the IT security team should work together. There's also another angle to it. See, what happens is that in most places, there is a transaction monitoring team which is different from the CISO team. So they basically monitor customer transactions and those kind of things, and the CISO team generally monitors the infrastructure. So both basically work in silos, and hence we don't have a full view of what is happening at both the places, and that can sometimes leads to problem, or identifying the issue very late in the cycle. So I think it's very critical that this should be integrated together, because there are different technologies that are available for monitoring both these aspects, and somewhere I think we need to see how we can consolidate those two things, so that you get a better picture of things.
yeah. So that's a great point, and um, I would probably talk a little bit about what Alan mentioned earlier, jazz. So you can listen to jazz and just have, I mean, listen to jazz over a coffee and enjoy it. And the other is understanding the philosophy of jazz. So you can listen to jazz, but once you understand the philosophy of jazz, then you see that the fundamental philosophy of jazz is something very different. It's not just a music, it's a philosophy, right? So I'll not get into jazz, Alan, but I would love to have a chat. And Navankur is also very deeply interested in jazz. Huh? So we can have a chat on that. So similarly, coming to the philosophy of zero trust, so we may see zero trust coming in as various avatars. I mean, various avatars, huh? Alan. But um, what is that fundamental thing? That fundamental thing is that in cybersecurity, and NIST defines it very nicely, that in cybersecurity paradigm, I mean, zero trust is where you do not explicitly grant trust as a fixed thing. So trust is something which will continuously be evaluated. That's the basic core idea. So in our entire architecture model, there shouldn't be fixed trust. If we
That
do
is true.
that, then using that model, I can have a zero trust network. I can have zero trust something else. But the idea is that I cannot have fixed trust. So if somebody gives the username and password, I may trust the individual now, but after some time, I may not trust because of certain behavior. So the architecture has to be built in such a way that trust is never granted implicitly, and it has to be continuously evaluated. So that's the broad thing. Now, this is going to be kind of implemented in many different forms through many different technologies and stuff like that going forward. Now, back to Alan. Alan, do you want to talk a little bit about how the zero trust model is being implemented in various technologies which
Yes,
are
thank you for
available today?
I think there is one element that is absolutely fundamental in zero trust is the trust is context sensitive. To draw an analogy, let's take a real example, okay? Amongst the big problems that zero trust has to solve is the result of a request of a required action legitimate as regards to a certain number of rules of your company and a certain number of habits as well. For instance, if let's say it's an industrial, very complex process. I had this example very recently. There are a certain number of actions that a sensor can trigger as part of the industrial process. Depending on the value of, let's say, the temperature, you will accelerate the speed of a pump that is pumping the cooling fluid into a massive reactor, right? So too cold and you reduce the speed of the pump. Too hot, you need to increase big time the pump. So you trust for a while the sensor to talk to the middleware that talks to the pump that accelerates it. Now, that instruction, so you would trust the sensor to do that. Then all of a sudden, you realize that in the traffic that goes to the middleware, you have instruction that you do not want to see in a production mode. This is an instruction that goes into the configuration mode that actually changes the function that pilots the entire process. And you are not able to do that in production mode. It's too dangerous. You rechange the engineering. So you would have the zero trust function would have learned what baseline behavioral of the traffic is in production, and that can change from a plant to another, from a bank to another. So there is first a necessary condition for zero trust to adapt this moving target of trust that changes over time. That is machine learning and artificial intelligence, because you cannot program manually that I will trust this sensor to change the speed of my pump and that's it. Because if someone hacks the sensor, and says, it's too cold, it's too cold, it's too cold, the pump will send some cooling fluid, and on the other reverse situation, not refrigerate anymore the reactor, and the reactor will explode. Zero trust enables to learn and say, we've never seen this order at that time. If someone like steals your car, yes, the car will start because you got the key. The person has stolen the key. But someone sees the car and says, that's not daddy. He will not drive this fast at this hour on that road at that speed. The way he parks, that's not him, even if the key is okay. So that is a super dynamic way of authentication that goes beyond the password and ID of a device and of a person, and have learned, and it needs time to learn. Don't believe machine learning learns overnight a very complex behavior of an entire company. It takes 20 weeks sometimes to properly learn. So I believe the way we put zero trust in action, a big ally to it is machine learning and artificial intelligence that adapts to you. He learns the way you drive, and then all of a sudden, how can he drive like that? You know, and that is the beginning of putting zero trust in action.
So Alan, I wanted to go to the next question with you, because you brought up something very interesting point. What are some of the critical capabilities, like for example, zero trust network access, or there could be many others, right? So zero trust is being implemented in many different ways today. So what are some of the critical capabilities which zero trust solution has? And I'll come back to all of you also, because the critical capabilities are something very important, and use cases. We can combine both of these together also if you want, because it's kind of related. So can you talk about some of the use cases and critical capabilities of zero trust?
I would say one of the critical capabilities is integration of your various parts of your cybersecurity. It has to be seen as a holistic approach. You cannot have pockets of cybersecurity that are disconnected from your entire IT ecosystem. The first one is it has to be integrated, because if it's not integrated, say I see some part of my solution sees this instruction that is definitely has nothing to do at this time. It's never seen before. It's very weird to see it. Now, it needs to be able to connect that information to the rules that you have established, and the rules depends on every single company, as is curve risks that changes from another company. So it needs to be able to check that and to be connected. And then if you have a doubt, you would send that to a sandbox. You would send this little instruction to a sandbox that will execute it and see, this is definitely weird. We would never have allowed that sort of code to be executed. Hence, you automatically micro-segment it as a response of 3 different cybersecurity expertise. The first one is an edge protection. The second one is a machine learning comparison to what normal is. The third one is send it to the sandbox that then will instruct the firewall to segment, to kill, to isolate. And it needs to be done in the proper IP range, because you don't want to put the entire company in the blue because you have a problem in an IP range. So integration and holistic view, to me, is an absolutely
very important
condition to have zero trust.
Wonderful. So Lakshmi, we were having a chat on what are the critical capabilities and also the use cases. And so you can add your point of view on both the use cases and critical capabilities, and we'll then come back to Agnello and Nabankur also on the same question. So Lakshmi.
So the very first capability is the SD-WAN capabilities, which will replace a lot of physical presence of devices and appliances So that's a very important use case, or very first use case, the SD-WAN usage. The second usage is internet access, that is through secure web gateways, which will also be integrated, and also it will be validated. As you mentioned, the trust is not explicitly given to anyone or any identity or any device, which will be validated again and again to enable internet access or other capabilities of this zero trust. That's the second part. And also, more importantly, whether you are accessing to on-prem applications or to the applications hosted in the cloud or to the SaaS applications, all that access will be routed through this centralized zero trust access network. And also, you will be validated again. And all that access controls is happening through this, especially for cloud and cloud related workloads, or the data center which is hosted on-prem, or to the legacy applications. So that is also again controlled based on the identity and the devices, and from where they are connecting, which network they are connecting, all that will be validated. Apart from this, there are other services like firewall as a service, which will again replace a lot of the branch level firewall that can be controlled, and all that will be, again, it's a software based and a cloud based technology. Another thing is the quality of service. So right now in the traditional model, we were not able to control the bandwidth, right? We are giving the bandwidth, more bandwidth to the entertainment related activities, and we are not able to control the quality of the service and quality of bandwidth, and that can be controlled with this technology. And again, the data leakage prevention is again in silos, and we are deploying in multiple places, and we are covering multiple network points, which will be controlled through a integrated, or the data leakage prevention also will be consolidated with this zero trust approach. Apart from DLP, there are two other components from a security controls perspective. One is the network traffic analysis. Again, what kind of traffic is coming, how it is controlled, all that will be managed with this, the network traffic analysis platform. And user entity behavior analytics, again, what device and who is accessing, whether they are accessing the right application, and the same behavior is not, I mean, same behavior is profiled. I mean, whatever profile is in the profile for that particular user or device is the same one is expliciting right now, or is there something different from the earlier profiled behavior that can be compared, and the access can be restricted, or access can be again challenged with the device or with the user. So these are all some of the capabilities you will achieve with this. But more importantly, the SASE people, or the SASE organization, or the zero trust provider, will they are bringing more capabilities, and it is not fully mature. It's a journey, it's a concept. When you are implementing this concept, you have to select the right components which is going to help your architecture. So first, to build a futuristic architecture for the organization based on the needs and the requirements. Then you build the capabilities and the components on top of that. Then you go for the consolidation. That should be the approach, because that's all from my side.
Great. So thanks, Lakshmi. So one thing just I wanted to highlight, those who are listening, you might have noticed that Lakshmi kind of told everything as critical capability of zero trust, which is a very interesting point, which I want to highlight, that it is indeed so. And why is it so? See, earlier in our previous kind of architectural models, what was happening was that you kind of plug security into various elements of your IT architecture. That's how it was. So you have this security box, that security box, and everybody in the industry was thinking, how do we unify? Just like in the physics world of physics, there is this grand unified theory which people are still trying to figure out, huh? So how do I unify all of these things together? So various approaches came. So one approach is like, I'm going to connect each of these tools together, and I have this layer in the middle which is going to be the communicator, huh? And that's how I'm going to integrate the security world. Now that is one approach, which is the SOAR approach. Then came the other zero trust approach, which says, no, we want to do it differently. We want to change the architecture altogether. So what I can do is I can have a gateway and everybody connects to me, and I implement security over there. So it's a I'm more on the network side. Now, zero trust philosophy could be applied in many other contexts, but on the network side of zero trust, then what you can do is you can route everything through the gateway, and then all kinds of security things can be applied over there. So that's the shift which is happening at zero trust. So in a way, the critical capabilities of zero trust will end up being all the capabilities of zero trust in the long run, not in the short run, but in the long run almost all can be plugged in together. So in a way, zero trust is a kind of attempt for unification of cybersecurity, of simplification of cybersecurity, which was
Sure.
otherwise not possible earlier.
You're right.
So
Absolutely.
Namankur, you want to add something on the
No,
critical
no, I will
capabilities?
add, I will add only one thing. Of course, everything has been told by Lakshmi and Alain on machine learning, and everything he has told. Only one point I want to add is, see, in spite of, you also asked about the use cases and the critical capabilities. Now, one issue is the vendor, which, who is connecting, whether the vendor is personally responsible or company is responsible. So that is one area which is always hazy. And we need to know really who is the vendor, who is connecting. Even employees also. Employees who is connecting and whether he is having proper permissions and not. Now, keeping all this in mind, we know that malware is something extremely dangerous now. And if something is coming inside with a authentic permission, with the employee or somebody else's credentials, a malware has entered the system. The critical capability of this zero trust, I would say that anti-APT solution or anti-malware solution is extremely critical, and that has to be, as Alain mentioned about machine learning and all. So it has to be implemented properly so that it can really understand, is it the authentic user who is using this? No, I don't think. There is something wrong. So that kind of behavior analysis has to be done, and that is my addition to this, whatever Lakshmi said.
Thanks, Nabankur. So we will extend this by a little bit more, and I'd like to continue this discussion. So, Agnello,
Yeah. So I
any
think
thoughts on the critical capabilities?
yeah. So I think Lakshmi and Naburkan, they have pretty much talked about all the capabilities. I think one critical aspect that is that we need to carry out the regular assessments or the red team exercises. Okay, because what happens is that you perceive things to work in a certain way and you build all these capabilities. Like for example, you mentioned about these anti-malware solutions. Now we have seen how easy it is to bypass and break through this. And unless you do this red team exercises on a regular basis and actually find out which are the blind spots and which are the holes which are there in the network, you will always have a wrong sense of security or comfort that is there. So hence these red team exercises are very, very critical, very important. So you should these exercises should be done to look at or validate your prevention, detection, and all response controls, how quickly you are able to detect and respond to this. So red team exercises, cyber drills are very important aspects of it. A cyber crisis management plan is very, very key. So what happens is that in a cyber crisis situation, there is always a panic situation. Okay, and people, they know things, but what happens is when disaster strikes, people panic and they basically do wrong things. A simple thing is like, if a system is suspected to have a malware or something, they must shut down the system instead of disconnecting from the network, and hence you lose the evidences and those kind of things. So these are some very critical aspects which should be looked at. And lastly, I think in spite of doing everything, you could still have a cyber attack, which is and hence cyber insurance is a very critical aspect. We don't talk too much about cyber insurance, but I think that is something which everyone should assess, and if people have not already gone in for that, then I think it's high time that one should look at it. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think
Bikash,
Agnello
I
brought
want to add one more point on top of what Nabankur sir mentioned, and also mainly on the malware front, right? So one other capability is on the threat management is also one of the key capabilities of this zero trust. So you can integrate your own threat intel, or you can depend on the zero trust network providers threat intel. That is one. So that threat intel is going to act from two different perspectives. One is on the identity perspective, whether that identity, is there any credential leakage in the deep dark web or surface web, that will be first assessed. If there is a leakage, then the first step is you have to change your credentials, or you have to go for that first. With that leaked credential, you can't access. Okay, this is the threat intel is going to add value. From a malware perspective, you already have endpoint detection and response. You have antivirus controls. You have your vulnerability status. From a IT hygiene perspective, whether the device has any exploitable vulnerabilities, that is the first to check. Okay, what is the status of exploitable vulnerabilities in the endpoint which is trying to connect? Second, what is the verdict coming from your endpoint detection and response, or from antivirus systems, or any other anti-malware or anti-APT control? That is also going to be considered by the zero trust provider. This is also part of the validation process, not just the identity and the two-factor authentication. This is all these things all will be validated at each and every step. Then will be the access will be provisioned to the application or the resource which you have access, right? It's not once the access is provisioned, you will not get complete network access. You will get only the application which with your role, you will get only the limited access, not the full access. So the least privilege principle is also followed with this zero trust capabilities. Again, this is all seamlessly created by policies. Okay, you have to configure that properly, and you have to validate it before you go into production.
Great, wonderful. So we got a lot of interesting points. I would encourage anybody, if they have questions, to just either type it in the questions box or the chat box. So I got one question. So let me start that question with Alan. So Alan, is there what are some of the good resources or documents that you would recommend on zero trust?
I would.
Anybody else, if you have some questions, please do add. Yes.
I would recommend to familiarize ourselves as CISOs to neural networks science, because the way zero trust is implemented, as we said, is through machine learning algorithms. It is very important to understand how it works and also the limitations of these algorithms. Many times a neural network works as a series of tests achieved by specialized bits of software that have one single mission. Does that look like something malicious? And it will give a probabilistic number, something between 0 and 1, to say, oh, this really looks like something malicious, or this sort of look like something malicious, and goes to the next neuron, which is another elementary test that will check it and check it and check it, and it will do the sum of all these elementary tests and will give a value that is treated by the system to assess whether we are malicious, we are in presence of something malicious or not. But if you look at that from a scientific perspective, where is the intelligence here? Where does it earn the I in intelligence? It's not at this stage, because it's a series of Boolean tests. If, then, and, or. This has been on for 150 years, right? It's not new. Where it earns the I, when it becomes intelligent, it's because the weight of every of these elementary tests is reassessed depending on the output. So I would put 0.002 here and 0.005 here, and that weight is dynamically adjusted. And I want to come back to something that Agnello said that is absolutely key. Make drills, because then you will refine the reweighting part of the machine learning algorithm because you know that the output was a drill, or you did not know that the output was a drill, and you will refine the capacity of your own machine learning algorithms to be accurate. So I do advise people that put in place zero trust network access to familiarize themselves to what neural network science is within artificial intelligence and not be blinded by anyone that tells you, yes, there is intelligence, you can just, you're just off the hook, the thing is intelligent. It is not true. You have to refine it, put it at tests, and yourself reassess at which moment you want a decision and you don't want a decision.
Great point. So anybody else who wants to add like any interesting document that you suggest reading or a research paper?
May I add something, if I may add something? We have decided to open for free a learning platform that has trained hundreds of thousands of experts in the world. It's called Network Security Expert. You find it online. You have lots of lessons for free. We don't monetize that. And then you get yourself acquainted to these notions faster.
Great. So there are a couple of ones which I would also recommend, and Alan, we would love also some of those resources. If you want to share it with our community, we'll be very happy to share it with our community, because as you know, as a community, our goal is to create community goods and do something which is beneficial to the broader ecosystem. So any such effort like yours, we will be very happy to work with you and share that with our broader community. So on zero trust aspect, there are two documents which I would probably recommend. One is NIST has released architecture framework. So you can just search with NIST and zero trust and you will find the architecture document. That's a pretty nice, interesting document. And also there's another document called Beyond Corp by Google. Beyond Corp. So these are two documents which I would recommend for those who want to deep dive further into zero trust. Agnello, do you want to add anything?
No, so yeah, so you have mentioned that good resources like NIST is a very exhaustive document that is there, and okay, and Beyond Corp definitely that is what Google has. You know, I think probably they were the first implementers of zero trust. So I think these are very useful resources. Just one thing, you know, while we were discussing came out in my mind is that basically the collaboration between the security folks. I think today the hackers are far more collaborated than our security guys, you know, and somewhere I think the collaboration has to be there. So today also what happens is that we receive a lot of IOCs. Okay, so what are these IOCs? These IOCs are IP addresses, which are actually not very useful. So we get these IOCs and keep adding them. You don't know how long to keep the IP addresses there. You know whether so those kind of issues are there. So what we need basically is intelligence which is more useful rather than just getting IOCs. Probably TTPs and those kind of things are probably more useful to really have very good intelligence. So that is one key aspect I think which we struggle with, and that is something which we can better actually.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's a hard problem as well. We as a community attempted to do a few things on that front, sharing, but that did not work out so well. We couldn't do that well enough. Yeah, thanks Agnello for bringing that up. So let's move to the last part of our question, which is the success and failure factors. And let me start with Lakshmi. Lakshmi, I know you have actually kind of played with multiple zero trust technologies, etc., and you have worked on that. So what, according to you, are some of the top success and failure factors? If somebody wants to go ahead and implement zero trust, what would be some of the advice that you will have? So I don't know if you have some 10 commandments like thing or not, but
I will
what's
keep
your
it simple.
point of view on the success and failure factors? What's your advice for people who want to?
Let me talk about the failure factors, which is a very simple. We have only one or two. point is on the consolidation. See, we are going to consolidate multiple technologies, and we are going to depend on one service provider, right, for zero trust network access. So that maybe that is going to be a challenge, because most of the service providers as of now still they are evolving, and they have not reached full maturity. They are also adding capabilities, they are testing, and they are facing challenges, because the enterprises like large enterprises, they will have multiple requirements. So each and every requirement has to be tested and completely completely managed by the change or the shift. If 10% or 20% of the organization's current network architecture requirements are not able to meet by the vendor, again, you have to hold that movement, right? Otherwise, you have to maintain two different architecture or two different infrastructure failure point. So that is one. The consolidation is also going to be the challenge, and also you have to evaluate all the capabilities. Number three, as per your organization's requirement, or as per your organization's current network architecture, what is going to be changed, and how that change is going to impact from infrastructure as well as from the end user's perspective, and more importantly, how you are going to provide services to your customers, how this is going to affect your customers' requirements. So these three are some of the requirements that you have to validate before you move to zero trust architecture. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a cultural change is also required between IT and the security team, or the network and the security team. That cultural change has to happen, and also the service provider, the SASE or zero trust service providers, the role-based access controls is very important to manage this cultural related differences, because otherwise the IT and network and the security team will end up in fighting, or the collaboration, achieving the collaboration will be a difficult problem. From a success side, there are a lot of things. The first thing is the cost saving. Okay, so you can easily justify the infrastructure or the fresh architecture which you are trying to move. You can justify the cost saving because you are going to remove a lot of the physical infrastructure from the network, and you are going to consolidate controls, and you are going to remove a lot of controls in the future. So easily you can justify the cost factor. Second is the security on the endpoint and security on the identity side is definitely going to improve. And the third, the least privilege principle will be followed across the infrastructure. Immediately you will not achieve, but once your legacy applications and other applications also move to this journey, and you will achieve this 100%. So these three are success factors again.
Great, wonderful. So we got a question from one of the attendees. That is, let me ask Alan or anybody else. So the question is like this: that zero trust can be installed at different layers. If priority-wise needed, where it should be implemented first? Should it be in case of infrastructure? Should it be the identity and application access? Should it be database access? So what's your thought? Where should it be prioritized?
It's a very good question, by the way, because it deals with the methodology of implementation of zero trust, and basically is where do you start, right? You have to start where it matters most to your organization from a return on investment perspective. And that forces us as CISOs to ask the question, where is the money? How do we really make money as a company? And what is the really business critical? And start with that. Implement zero trust at this point where it's the most critical, that nobody can jeopardize that bit. And it is good because it involves a very healthy conversation with the rest of the organization. It's not the IT and security team against everybody, because we have to remind something. which is when you implement a higher level of security, you will annoy people in the organization. So you have to start by having this healthy conversation and explain the why, rally the human dimension to zero trust, because I've seen many great zero trust projects rejected recently for the human factor that has not been considered. You select the best technology, you select the best vendor, you select the best distribution channel, and you go heads on implementing. You just forget that there will be people behind these screens and struggling with these applications that they used to have access with in one authentication step. Now they need two, or they had this latency and then they have a little bit more latency. And they have some of their rights access that have been changed. If they reject it, you will not succeed in implementing zero trust. So I think where to start is where it matters most, but having the discussions with the entire ecosystem of your stakeholders that tells you more about the criticality. And then you are grounded, your legitimacy in terms of the gatekeeper, because you're a bit of a gatekeeper at the end of the day, you're legitimate as is, and people will understand the why and accept the incremental zero trust authentication or access technology in place.
Great. Thanks, Alan. So anybody else, Lakshmi, I mean,
I would like to add a few
or
points on this.
Nabankur, so where do you think we should implement zero trust first? Should it be on the infra
Yeah,
perimeter?
let me.
Should it be identity and application access, or should it be database access?
Yeah, see, basically the zero trust is on the network movement. Movement of packets in the network is the primary thing for any zero trust. So it has to verify anything which is trying to connect to our systems. Now, this is not one solution. When we talk about zero trust, it's a multiple solutions which have to be implemented. Now, as Alan mentioned about the criticality of the company, if the database is extremely vulnerable or database has to be secured, then the DAM system, the database access management system, which is implemented, that and everything which is connected and the DAM's particular the features which are implemented, how it will be examining who is doing what, that has to be very critically assessed. And as I mentioned earlier, there are privileged identity management system, identity access management systems, web application firewalls. These are the various things which have to be taken together to finally achieve a zero trust. Zero trust is not one solution that if you do that, nothing else is required. In fact, everything, when it is properly implemented, it will give you the zero trust desirable elements. Now, if you are doing a privileged identity management system, you can implement 10 solutions, 15 solutions. So that is one thing. Solution implementation is one thing, but it is not all. Afterwards, you have to see how you are implemented, how you are scrutinizing the logs, what logs actually you have, what particular rules you have implemented. That is extremely important, and I think the individual teams will have to go into the details of what rules we are implementing, and these rules have to be tested. For example, a malware, when I talked about the anti-malware solution, after you implement, you have to create some fake malwares and see whether the malware solution is properly stopping it and taking care of it and generating alerts. Similarly, for PIM or IDEM solution or a web application firewall, you have to create the test cases and see whether the solutions are properly working or not. And that is how I think we should proceed.
So great point, Nabankur. I'll just try to summarize and please tell me if I did it right. So what you are saying is that zero trust is not a single solution. It could be multiple, it could be implemented in form of multiple different technologies and solutions. Now, which one should you implement first depends on your business context. If
Absolutely.
the database is the most critical one that you want to access first, or is it that your remote access and people are across in various parts, and that part of security is very important? Depending on your business context, you can prioritize which one you want to do first. Is that right? Right summarization, Navankur?
Yeah,
Anybody
that is
else?
true. That is true, but basically the network access and controls, there are zero trust service providers. They will do the basic things. But after the company will have to decide which is my critical crown jewels, how do I protect my crown jewels, where do I keep my emphasis. See, malware will have to be controlled. The privileged identity management, the vendors are coming in, they have to be controlled. So it is all together the security will be achieved. You just cannot say that my database is very important. So when I implement a DAM properly, I'm secured. No, you have to
So on
have
top of it,
controls
you
on
have to
other
look at
things
it at
also.
a holistic.
Yes,
So the
yes,
question
yes.
was like, how do I prioritize first? So that's based on business context, but then the roadmap has to be
You cannot
defined based
ignore the
on
other
your
areas also.
holistic. So the second question which came up is slightly on the holistic side, Navankur. Huh? So that is slightly beyond just zero trust. That is how to protect the company from advanced security threats and data breaches while achieving compliance with any data privacy and security laws. So Agnello, do you want to add something on this? How to have
Yeah,
real security while achieving compliance? I know you have to juggle with that. You, Navankur,
right.
Lakshmi, all of you. Huh?
Yeah. So I think if you focus on securing your infrastructure, your network, I think compliance is just a thing that gets done automatically. So if you try to work the other way around, where you do things for compliance and don't look at really the security, then you're heading for trouble. I would, so while compliance is very important, and obviously, and we work in a regulated industry, so we know very well, see, compliance is very important. But having said that, if you understand the risk correctly, and you really put in the controls that are required, compliance is achieved automatically. So I think that's how one should look at it.
Great. And in fact, earlier, Agnello, you had mentioned about multiple things when you spoke about like identifying the vulnerabilities, doing red teaming. You also spoke about detection abilities with SIEM, etc. You also spoke about doing the drills and cyber crisis management, and finally also having
Cyber
uh,
insurance.
insurance, right? So you
Yeah,
kind
right.
of answered this question in past once,
Yeah, right.
and a good place to probably look at is something like a NIST CSF. I somehow like the
Right.
NIST CSF a lot because
Right.
I recall Alan once mentioned that the business language is different from the security language, right? So the first time any framework came up where the language is something which can be understood by any business owner. Like if you go and talk about all the security controls of ISO, I mean that's something which sounds Greek, huh? Whereas when you talk about like we need to identify the threats and vulnerabilities, we need to detect if we need to protect ourselves, and we need to detect whether we are being attacked or we have been breached or not, and we should also be able to respond and recover from a breach. Now this language is very simple and easy to understand, right? So when you talk about identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, these 5 buckets of NIST CSF, that's very aligned with business. So I would also suggest that you can look at NIST CSF as a model to build your security framework. And since we are at the end, last kind of minute, I wanted to close with a slightly different kind of question, and I'll start with Alan first. So, Alan, and all of you, in today's cybersecurity world, security folks probably need to deal with all the negatives, right? So, you have to deal with all the problems, not the happy situations don't come to you. All the unhappy situations come to you, right? So, in a situation like that, how do you manage your stress? How do you keep yourself positive and happy? What are some of your ways to manage these difficult times, Alan, outside of work?
Again, it's the human factor. You need to have allies, people that are in your tent when a problem comes in. and not necessarily your team in IT and security, but people from the production, people from the marketing, people from the sales that are your advocates, because, and you have to have established this relationship before the breach, so that they can be your relays into implementing the roadmap out of the crisis. And the second thing is, amongst the allies you may want to consider, use us. It's always good to have an expert at your side when you present to your CEO that you just had a breach, because we can put things in perspective for you. And this is one of the missions that we have as the office of the CISO, is to be at your side when things go wrong, and be taking some bullets at your side, explaining, saying that you're not the only bank to have that. There are 86 others that have the same problem, and this is how they got out of it. So it's about not being alone, and use people at your side. And we are here as a vendor, not only to launch products and charge you, but also to help you on your daily challenges and the human challenges that go with the CISO mission.
Thanks, Alan. So I wanted to kind of have a slightly different question with outside of security because of the current context. So Nabankur, how do you distress yourself? How do you manage your happiness and mental state? So
Yeah,
what are your strategies?
there is a Hindi song, you know, that is हम जिंदगी के साथ निभाता चला गया, हर फिक्र को धुएं में उड़ाता चला गया. Devanand movie, you might remember. So what I have done throughout my life, I am almost at the fag end of my career. I am nearing 70 now, almost. And see, what I have done is, after taking care of things in the office, and by mixing with everybody, the business side and my employees, I used to go to my junior most employee, sit next to him and ask him, what are you doing? Let me see. And that used to encourage them. And by that, as I mentioned about implementation, time and time again, I see to it that the implementation to the last person is done properly. After taking care of all these things in the office and the board members, I have convinced my board members umpteen number of times, and I have been very fortunate that I've been able to do that. And after taking care of all these office, when I come home, I don't think about office, and I love music. Music is my passion. And as you can see, this particular clock in my wall, which is a musical symbol, and I sing myself, and Bikash also knows about it. I sing a number of things, you know, Bengali and Hindi songs, various kinds, and that is my only passion. Apart from my family, my only passion is music and traveling. So these two things keep me totally free from all these issues in the office. Next day when I go to office, it's a fresh day.
Wonderful. Lakshmi, what's your framework?
Yeah, so my framework is not, I mean, I believe I don't want to run away from this, the work or the stress which are coming, because I'm the head of security operations for the large enterprise. So I don't want to run away from this responsibility. So stress, this is, I mean, the stress will be there, or this problem is going to be there for some more time. So we have to manage within that framework itself. So I will spend my time for my own research on the attacks and attackers. One of the recent interesting research topic is on the TrickBot infrastructure. Recently, Microsoft has taken down this infrastructure along with FS Isaac, Symantec, and a few other people. But again, the TrickBot infrastructure has come down. They have again, they started this infrastructure with a different DNS setup. They see, we all know blockchain is going to help security, but blockchain is also going to help the attackers. So now the TrickBot attackers, they have followed the blockchain concept. They went to MRDNS infrastructure, and they have built this new DNS. So with that, we can't take down this infrastructure. This is going to be there permanently. This is one area of concern. The other side, now Microsoft filed a court case on the illegal usage of DLL files in these trick-bot infrastructure. So this area is going very interesting. One side there is a legal angle, the other side the blockchain concept is also coming and helping the attackers. So we have to see how we have to protect our infrastructure.
So
So,
Lakshmi's distressing is also security, unlike
yes.
Nabankur, which is
Yeah.
music. What about Agnello? Agnello, how do you
Yeah,
distress your?
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, the bad things generally happen on weekends and during long holidays. So unfortunately for us, it is very difficult to detach yourself completely from this. But I think probably spending more time with the family, it really helps to distress. And I try to spend as much time possible. And actually, this work from home has given this opportunity where you can spend more time with your family, and that I think is a number one de-stressor for me actually. And a little bit of
Wonderful,
probably yoga and exercise can help, which I'm not able to do very well, but that is one of my resolutions to do better actually. So that's how it
wonderful.
is.
So for me, one of the things I try out many different things. One of the things is meditation, and I have a kind of view about meditation, which is there are two schools of meditation. One is kind of you focus on something, but there's another school of meditation which is awareness meditation. Now, when you think of building a security program, you of course want to identify threats and protect from that, etc., right? I mean, you're trying to protect also in a way similarly from bad state of mind, negative state of mind, unhappy state of mind, right? So for a long time, the industry, security industry, tried to kind of protect, and then realized no, protection is not possible. We should be able to detect threats, and if we get compromised, we should be able to respond and recover from it. Now think about the mind. Are you able to detect what's happening in your mind? And if you get into a negative state, are you able to respond and recover from it in a seamless manner? So we want a resilient security in place, right? We want to detect, respond, recover. But what about our mind? Are we able to detect, respond, and recover? So mindfulness meditation had been an extraordinary tool for myself to build a SOC for my body and my mind. And I'll give you a couple of very interesting examples. One is I used to have jaw pain, and I used to think like, am I having some issues? And the moment you do a Google search, you become a doctor and discover you have 10 different diseases, right? So I had kind of shrunk it down to 2 to 3 possibilities through elimination. But once I started doing meditation, I realized one thing, that while driving to my office, I keep my jaw absolutely tight, which I never realized for last 10 years, that while driving my jaws are tight. But once I started doing this meditation, I built better sensors to observe myself, which is observe my mind, observe my body. And now what has happened is I am much better in detecting that I have got into a negative state, and that negative video which I'm playing in my mind is of something which is 5-year old or 3-year old, but I'm still replaying that bad movie. We don't watch bad movies 3 times, 4 times, right? But we do it in our heads. So I'm a lot more aware of my mind. So it's like building a mental SOC, where you are able to detect and then build the ability to respond and recover. So mindfulness meditation had been a game changer for me. So I would like to thank all of you, Alan, Nabankur, Lakshmi, Agnello, and all our community members who joined us today. So I believe this was a very interesting discussion. I wanted to end with something different, so spend 10 minutes more so that we also talk something outside of Zero Trust.
You didn't
So
talk about your
thanks all of
jazz.
you.
You
Oh
didn't talk
yeah,
about
jazz.
your
We
jazz.
have to. Yeah, I listen to jazz every morning with a coffee. So Alan,
Let
you
me
and
add,
me, we
let
can
me
have a
add if
chat on
you
jazz.
allow me. Let
Sorry?
me add, if you allow me, just one
Sure,
sentence is,
sure.
guys, I cannot think of a better country in the world to relax than India. You guys are so much above the rest of humankind, and what you just end up with, Bikash, is beautiful. Your ending was fantastic. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks all of
Thank
you.
you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Alan. Thanks, Lakshmi. Thanks, Agnello, Bikash.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks
all of
everyone.
you. Yeah. Thank you so much.